slammed her to the pavement, cuffed her in broad daylight, all because she was a black woman. No screaming, no fighting back, just a stare so cold it made the cops shift in their boots. They thought they were putting her in her place, but minutes later, they found out she's an undercover CIA agent. Watch from power trip to panic mode in seconds. In seconds. Watch till the end to see what happens when real authority walks in wearing the wrong skin color. His fist met her defiance. The scene erupted in frozen disbelief as the crowd held its collective breath, silent and tense. Dark skin, clenched jaw, her eyes remained unyielding even as handcuffs clicked into place around her wrists. Her resolve burned under the unfair accusation, its origin rooted in the deep, tangled web of systemic prejudice. She stood unbowed, as if hiding a power incomprehensible to those around her. The unspoken question lingered. How many would walk past? Eyes diverted. Would they ignore the truth that begged to be heard? The chaotic New York City street hummed around them, but this pocket of sorrow and conflict commanded attention. Parents shielded their children's eyes, unsure of what lesson this moment would impart. A lone woman in the crowd whispered urgently into her phone, details spilling out like quicksilver as she described the unfolding tableau. The woman's voice wavered between disbelief and anger, a latent fury at this all-too-common spectacle. The arresting officers, unrelenting in their task, moved with the authority granted by their uniforms, a power they believed went unquestioned. Yet beneath their bravado lay a routine born of bias, greener than the edges of their starched collars. The black woman's resistance was quiet but palpable, and it seemed to unsettle them more than any shouted protest would. Their barked commands contrasted starkly with her silence. It was not compliance but contemplation, as if a chess master judging her opponent's moves, waiting for them to reveal their hand. Onlookers began to murmur. A ripple of discomfort swept through the assembly as it became evident that this woman, though unknown to them, was someone different, someone who had faced an array of injustices before, an expert in enduring public trials not of her own making. The sun glinted off the badge a young officer wore, blinding a nearby tourist who stumbled back, their coffee arcing into the air, unnoticed amid the drama. More onlookers gathered, summoned by curiosity, and smartphones held aloft to capture and amplify the moment. In public squares and living rooms, pixels and sound bites spread, a test case for justified outrage or simmering acceptance. As the woman was led to the waiting police car, a couple of feet shuffled uneasily, torn between civility and complicity. They saw the reality in front of them, a living indictment of equity's absence, and their thoughts played out across furrowed brows and pursed lips. Her arrest unfolded with methodical, mechanical precision, yet without a shred of elegance or subtlety. The distant siren's wail provided a haunting backdrop, an echo of judicial oversight that felt far removed from the immediacy of this conflict. Meanwhile, the officers' voices rose above the humdrum, filling the hollows in the city's melody with their insistence on order over justice, action over understanding. But beneath it all, in every gap between their words, lay an awareness, an unacknowledged whisper of something deeper, something they couldn't quite put their finger on. The police vehicle door shut with the final metallic clang, yet the act felt as if unfinished. Unspoken exchanges lingered around the edges, a shared gaze glinting with defiance, shouldered aside, but not forgotten. In those last seconds before the tires screeched into motion, she turned her face slowly, purposefully to the crowd, a silent vow in her eyes. Her fate seemed sealed within those four walls of tinted glass, but it was an illusion. A far greater truth lay hidden within her, one silently biding its time, awaiting release. And as the car moved away, an officer turned, grappling with a sensation that their victory felt hollow, already crumbling under the weight of its own misconceptions. The world kept its eyes fixed on the vanishing taillights, simmering with questions, filled with the newfound doubt about the narrative they'd just witnessed. With every revolution of the car's wheels, a clock ticked closer to revelation, to an exposure waiting to unravel the fabric of guilt and innocence. It was merely the beginning. The crowd lingered, reluctance pinned by an invisible thread that tied them to the place where an injustice bloomed. Muted whispers fluttered amongst them, like a frantic chorus struggling for harmony amid discord. "Do you see that?" A young man's voice cut through the small gathering like a sharp blade, slicing through the heavy silence that clung to the air. "She didn't even flinch," a woman replied, her tone balanced on the edge of admiration and disbelief. Around them, eyes darted, seeking understanding in the faces of strangers. Each glance held a question, unspoken, churning on loops through their mindscapes. The world was watching, yet what it saw differed, colored by personal prejudices and experiences. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve, pointing to the spot where the woman stood moments ago. "Why did they take her, Mommy?" His innocent eyes mirrored the weight of what many pondered but dared not voice out loud. His mother looked down, her lips a thin line. Could she dredge up an answer both simple and honest? "Sometimes," she began, sifting through her words as if extracting a truth buried deep in soil. "People make bad choices because they don't understand." Nearby, a suited businessman shook his head, disbelief etched into his expression. His position denoted power and privilege, yet his unease revealed a man whose moral and professional worlds had just collided. The spectacle had disturbed more than his commute. It had shaken his view of fairness that he had taken for granted. In the swirling aftermath, speculation brewed as rapidly as the ever-moving crowd dispersed. A current of uncertainty flowed through them, stilled only by the knowledge that their stories, the fragments they gathered in scraps and snippets, were far from complete. A group of teens watched the unfolding scene with eyes alight, recording with more than just their phones. Behind them, an elderly figure gleaned strength from their energy, leaning on nostalgia mixed with hope. Once more the young man spoke, his voice now mingled with determination. Where was justice today? More eyes turned, seeking warmth in the jarring cold of shared conscience, and his statement sparked something unspoken within the crowd. A silent agreement, visible only through nods that passed from one face to another. Meanwhile, across the street at a window table, an elderly woman observed with a painter's eye for detail. Her sketchbook lay open, capturing not just scenes, but emotions, immortalized in the graphite etchings of her hand. Her focus was steady, restrained by age's wisdom, yet unwavering on one face among many, an officer's cold imposition. Would that mark remain untouched by the knowledge to come? Among the murmuring masses, the scene lingered longer than it should, tucked into the pockets of personal narratives carried home. Each witness transformed into an unwitting courier of fragmented truths, yet their collective story remained incomplete, awaiting the woman whose voice was yet silent. As evening shadows began to stretch, the specter of what transpired lingered over the street long after feet shuffled away. Unspoken was not unheard, and invisible threads continued to weave a tapestry of unheard truths now spread across the city, ranging from casual deference to insistent outrage. And somewhere at the periphery, understanding flickered to life in the foremost corridors of notables, those who watched from the sidelines but had ears to the ground. Change could start from whispers, if the right ears chose to listen. Perhaps today would plant the seeds of a deeper awareness, a crack in the foundations of authority that saw only surface pictures, layers, a mistaken identity, hidden truths, and clandestine alliances waited to be peeled away, unveiling the core of justice that could yet rise from undershrouded memory. Justice waits, it never forgets. Would they listen when the truth finally spoke? The invisible barrier between them, the onlookers and the law enforcers, was brewing, simmering under layers of order and expectation. Each tick of the city's clock seemed to stretch the taut silence, intimate with its own rhythm. Now the rift felt wider, like two shores pulled apart by the currents of disbelief and judgment. Officers huddled around a black and white monitor in the precinct, their faces cutouts of concentration. The grainy footage from street cameras played out before them, projecting shadows of an incident fresh in their minds, yet clouded by something akin to doubt. To them it was both a routine and a rupture, an everyday enforcement, tangled with an unexpected narrative. Outside, the day wore on, a tapestry woven from the fragments of stories shared by those who stayed to discuss, debate, and dream of a different reality. Even as they dispersed, their impressions lingered like echoes caught between skylines. Officer Reynolds, one of the arresting officers, paced beside his partner, Officer Mullins. His recent recruit's demeanor was tinged with frustration. "She didn't seem like, doesn't matter how things seem," Mullins cut in, his voice medicated by patience that belied a broader understanding or perhaps cynicism. "Check the records. Check the intent." Reynolds nodded, but couldn't shake the impression left behind. The indefinable air of resilience that woman carried. It gnawed at him, a subtle signal amidst the routine static of their duties. Across the precinct, detectives filled the conference room, their discussions woven with structured interruptions and weighted conjectures. Today's events had triggered something deeper, a recognition that transcended normalcy. Detective Rain, known for his perceptiveness, sat in silent contemplation. "She didn't flinch," he repeated silently, a puzzle piece that refused to fit the bigger picture they all sought to construct. Could she have known? Understood something they hadn't? Meanwhile, tension carried over into homes and workplaces, insidiously unspooling. An office worker, a desk lost in a sea of gray cubicles, found herself recalling the scene with a persistence of memory that wouldn't let go. The same scene played out endlessly, each iteration holding a sliver of variance, how the woman's jawline sat firm despite the arrest. An indicator as much as a motivation. A city bus hummed down the avenue, its passengers still recounting that day's striking events, framed by their understanding of urban justice. An older man with headphones gently nudged forward in his seat, mesmerized by voices recounting the spectacle of one woman against predominant force. His fingers tapped rhythmically against the plastic pole, each downbeat a silent prayer for change. Back in the precinct, the room ebbed with latent electricity. Officers exchanged glances shrouded in implicit questions. What they had witnessed didn't sit right, yet each minute pulled them further from introspection to resolution. A printed report was slid across the table, arrest details sitting exposed against the wood grain. Names, dates, but no clarity. They lingered on the officers' minds like shadows against the starkness of authority. "What do we do if—" began Reynolds again, breaking the silence. Mullins shrugged, his gaze unwavering. "Keep digging." The detective's seesaw dialogue ebbed and flowed, occasionally punctuated by sighs that echoed through their intentions. The room sighed with them, its walls reverberating with the oscillation between skepticism and conviction. And out there, beyond the precinct's brick facade, the crowd transformed into city currents, conversations weaving through alleyways and street corners. A landscape in rediscovery, fostering seeds of awareness and quiet rebellion. Silent allies formed from unlikely places, from the awake to the awakened, those who saw beyond the incident, knowing that where there was an arrest, there must be a reason, and where there was silenced defiance, there existed a voice just waiting for the right moment to be heard. How long could the space between right and perceived wrong remain unvoiced? Amidst those gray lines, would they find where truth began and prejudice ended? As night fell, an understanding seeped through them. Action, after all, was more telling than mere words. Only time would tell what narrative evolved from these silent, potent tensions. The precinct was a cacophony of clacking keyboards, ringing phones, and murmured conversations. Yet amidst the chaos, the composure of the woman they had arrested earlier that day was a stark, frozen contrast to the frenetic energy around her. She sat in an interrogation room, the fluorescent lights buzzing softly overhead, her presence seeming to absorb the noise, transforming it into a tunnel of solitude. Officer Reynolds stood outside the one-way glass, watching. Her serene demeanor, even under the glare of such scrutiny, confounded him. She had spoken so few words, just asserting her right to remain silent. Yet her silence spoke volumes. It reverberated through the room as if she commanded the space by mere presence alone, a silent chord that refused to be struck down. A hand rested on Reynolds' shoulder. It was Officer Mullins, his partner, with a look that balanced curiosity with doubt. "Pretty calm for someone in custody," he commented, not bothering to mask the edge of suspicion that colored his tone. His words tumbled into an unasked question. What did she know that they didn't? Inside the interrogation room, the woman's eyes shifted ever so slightly, scanning the room with a calculated precision. Every detail was absorbed, even the minutiae that the officers took for granted. Skin dewy under the lights, she exuded an assuredness that unsettled those who thought they knew authority. Her serenity was her armor, an unreadable expression that deflected judgment like Kevlar against bullets. "Look at her," Reynolds whispered. Not from any real fear of being overheard, but from an instinctual reverence. "He hasn't said a word, but it feels like she's leading this dance." Mullins nodded, scratching at the stubble on his chin as if it could produce an answer. "They always teach us to control the room, but here we are." His cynicism felt like an admission, a thin acknowledgement of a balance tilted towards this woman's silent strength. Meanwhile, Detective Rain entered the room, dropping a file on the table with intent. He didn't sit, choosing instead to loom slightly, a deliberate decision to exert dominance, a perennial tactic in their subtle game of control. Yet it wasn't intimidation that flickered in the air, but curiosity. Who was she truly? "We've run your name through our systems," Rain initiated, his voice cutting through the charged silence. There was a pause for effect, but still no answer came from the woman. Only her eyes moved, flashes of something akin to amusement briefly darkening her gaze. "Ms. Tasha Walker. Nothing remarkable about your background, so why the theatrics today?" Silence again, a thick skein threading through the atmosphere. Some officers flashed knowing glances through the observation glass, interpreting the quiet as defiance rather than strategy, misunderstanding her composure as mere arrogance. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," Rain said, shifting tactics. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, attempting to bridge the gap between assumption and reality. It was then that he noticed the almost imperceptible twitch of her lips, like the shadow of a smile. The light above flickered briefly, casting intermittent shadows that painted the room in shades of gray, blurring lines of certainty. It was as if the universe echoed their internal conflict, visualizing the disruption they all felt, but couldn't entirely fathom. However, as the minutes ticked by, the balance seemed to recalibrate in her favor. Her quiet tenacity began redrawing the power lines in the officers' minds. An unsolved puzzle sat in the center of their shared tension, the weight of an undisclosed truth pulling their own assumptions into question. When Rain glanced back at his team, Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. An embryonic doubt nestled deep in his chest. That doubt was fueled by her stoic presence and further exacerbated by each passing second of silence. Every beat without a confession was another opportunity to contemplate the unknown, to wonder about the hidden stories beneath the surface of their assumptions. If they could read between the silence, what truths might they uncover? Finally, Rain stood back. Frustration curled at the edges of his determination. "I guess we'll just have to see how long you'll sit there in silence," he offered, his tone caught between challenge and admiration. As Rain and the officers retreated from the room, an unspoken understanding lingered between them, a recognition that her silence was not a refusal, but a statement. For every second she waited, confidence unfurled quietly like a flag, signaling an inner knowledge. Although her story remained untold, the resulting resonance whispered an undeniable truth. Silence is not absence, but presence. And in this case, a palpable, lingering anticipation. Even behind closed eyes, Tasha Walker saw it all. Her breath steady and rhythmic, she let the flow of the precinct wash over her, shaping the moment rather than being defined by it. Those were skills she had honed long before she found herself in this room, quietly defying expectation. Officers came and went past the interrogation room, their dialogue muffled by walls and protocol, but clear enough to those who'd trained themselves to listen. She knew the patterns. They were almost predictable. It was not hard to gauge their confusion, their attempts to understand her steadfast control. Each officer that passed was a marker of time, and Tasha understood them like a musician understood the rests between notes. Memories flashed behind her eyelids, echoes from a life most couldn't imagine. She saw the shadow-strewn paths she'd walked, missions executed in places that didn't show up on a map, identities donned and shed like seasonal clothing. Her life had been a constant unraveling of truths, a dance along the edges of what was seen and unseen. As she sat, memories coalesced into clarity. Her past was not just shadows. It was fire and resolve, an upbringing forged in adversity, her natural intelligence quickly becoming her weapon. There had always been others who doubted her, dismissed her for her skin and stride, yet those judgments crafted a weapon stronger than any they'd known. And all those years, all those missions that had seen her reinvented and reborn into roles unimaginable to those who had known her now, had prepared her for moments like today, designed to be invisible yet unforgettable. That had been her mark, a vital chess piece in a game where the stakes were both personal and global. The precinct's dull hum continued, its monotonous predictability punctuated by bursts of unwarranted clarity, mirroring the complexity she held like a hidden card. Each unchecked whisper across the precinct only added to her conviction. Here she was, the holder of a story untold, steady against their tides of speculation. Standing outside her room, the junior officer Reynolds leaned against the wall, flipping through a series of files. His frustration was a tangible entity, ricocheting from page to shadow with unrelenting energy. Every unanswered question expanded into a hypothesis yearning for answers. "Officer," Reynolds started, speaking to Mullins, who had wandered over to check in. "There's almost nothing on her," he said, voice edged with incredulity. "It's like she almost doesn't exist. Or maybe she's something more," Mullins suggested, infusing his words with a heft only experience could offer. His eyes held a nuance of respect, an acknowledgement that sometimes understanding required more than just discernment from within their restricted world. Inside the room, Tasha sensed the paradigm beginning to shift. A feeling deep down where instincts meet insight told her movement was coming. The smallest of smiles graced her lips, a recognition that this day would unravel like so many others in her past. Except she was ready. This arrest was not erosion, but evolution, one more step toward whatever played out beyond the echoes of officialdom. Rain returned, accompanied by a different officer with a stern demeanor. A superior by the bar on his shirt, the balance was changing, thoughts underpinned by a growing awareness. "Ms. Walker," the higher-ranking officer began, voice curated for professionalism. "There have been some developments." Silence revered every syllable, like hearing the first crack before an iceberg revealed its full depths. The silence swept over the room once more, but now Tasha's gaze met theirs. For now, she had decided to relent, granting them the opportunity, however brief, to comprehend the broader expanse of who she was, beyond assumption and stereotype. Her expression softened slightly, counterbalancing the steel resolve that had hitherto defined her demeanor. This time, as the silence roamed between them, it felt different, pregnant with possibilities rather than mere expectation. Tasha had seen this all before, each intervention part of an indelible pattern. As she acknowledged this, she left them with unyielding certainty. Sometimes what remains unseen screams the loudest, demanding recognition, because in the end, one truth resided above all else. Power isn't just about who commands the narrative, but who ultimately changes how the story is told. Detective Rain's new approach was deliberate, born of an understanding that Tasha Walker was not an ordinary detainee. In her silence, he detected more than defiance, a layering of intellect and intention that transcended typical encounters. Beside him, Lieutenant Avery's presence carried weight, his seasoned eyes scanning Tasha as if expecting her to morph from flesh to something far more significant. The precinct had a pulse, and in that moment, its steady beat had aligned with the rhythm Tasha set. The other officers watched through the glass, drawn to the intensity of this silent standoff. It was an unscripted drama that played on emotions and forced introspection. "Miss Walker, let's start again," Rain offered, settling into his chair with a calm that masked his own curiosity. "We know your name doesn't appear on standard registers, and that raises questions we need answers to." Tasha settled her gaze on Rain, electing to give him her full attention. Recognition flickered in her eyes, and acknowledgement not only of Rain's respect, but of the shifting dynamic. This moment required maneuvering as deft as any covert operation she'd undertaken, a dance of words and intent without revealing the hand prematurely. Lieutenant Avery broke in, his voice gravelly but devoid of accusation. "You've been through this before, haven't you? Handled situations where silence is your shield." He leaned back, arms crossed in a gesture that seemed to be less of an obstruction and more an allowance. "But there's more to this story, isn't there?" Tasha let the question hang in the air, contemplating the path her answer might forge. What was often considered a straightforward inquiry within these walls now represented an intersection, a choice between maintaining her covered intent or pivoting the course to something yet undefined. "I can leave you with more questions," she started, her voice smooth and tempered, a sound both unexpected and carefully deployed. "But there's a game we're all playing, whether we acknowledge it or not." Her words jolted the air, their intensity pulling focus not just from Rain and Avery, but from those lingering in the gallery as well. Even behind the glass, Reynolds felt a shift, as though the compass had realigned itself with a purpose larger than their immediate purview. "What game is that?" Rain pressed, determined to follow the thread she'd offered. His question was steady, his tone invoking a curiosity that pushed beyond procedure. Tasha's smile was faint, almost ephemeral. "The game of masks, where identities shift and perception takes precedence over truth." Her eyes locked on to Rain's, fathoming the depths of his understanding. It was a challenge issued without hostility, an invitation extended without peril. Lieutenant Avery detected it too, the deeper undercurrent in her words, an articulation not of threat but of potential, something he could sense as both an opportunity and a warning. There existed within her a signpost of hidden status, a recognition that couldn't be fully articulated, only felt. In that room, the air thickened, colored by unfamiliar terrain where the stakes were as vast as they were undefined. Yet it was here, amidst these uncharted waters, that Rain felt the possibility of revelation, something profound, hovering just beyond the grasp of the easily categorized. Tasha met his gaze unwaveringly, the quiet force of her presence a testament to unclaimed authority. "We'll all have to decide which truths matter," she concluded, laying a breadcrumb trail for them to follow deeper into the maze of half-realized revelations. She'd shifted the focus, a deft maneuver that prompted those within earshot to reconsider their positions, officers encased in protocol, witnesses bound by observation, a microcosm within a larger play of intent and disclosure. For Rain, the implications crystallized, the initial assumptions refracting across the spectrum of possibility. Yet it was Avery who ultimately vocalized the underpinning acknowledgement. "There's more at play here," he noted. His gaze nodded in the understanding that went beyond mere process. "We need to dig deeper, find what we're missing in this story." Outside the room, Reynolds stood transfixed, absorbing the direction their conversation implied. Possibilities that stretched beyond immediate arrest, toward reconciling identities and overarching narratives. In the charged quiet that ensued, an understanding burgeoned. Choices manifested not just for the officers, but for an audience unseen, tethered to the moment by intrigue and doubt. What Tasha Walker represented was not just an enigma for them to solve, but a mirror reflecting their own presumptions and the shared recognition that not all alliances are visible. As Rain and Avery excused themselves, the shift in power became palpable, a recognition that Tasha Walker had stirred questions beyond confining walls, questions that neither began nor ended with an arrest, but with deeper truths veiled beneath the surface. For now, Tasha resumed her silent vigil, knowing that the game was hers to maneuver, the board set and ready for unfolding moves. In the balance of silence and speech, her presence remained a powerful testament to the revelations yet to come. The precinct felt as if it were holding its breath. Conversations ebbed and flowed like waves against the certainty of the day. Each whisper, each glance exchanged among the officers carried unspoken confusion and a nascent resolve. Within the boundaries of legality and assumption, the presence of Tasha Walker had introduced an unfamiliar compulsion, a yearning to understand what truly lay beneath the surface of her arrest. Reynolds and Mullins returned to their respective desks, each wrestling with the unfolding drama that Tasha had become. Their notes, scattered across shared screens and dog-eared folders, offered little clarity. Instead, the records highlighted only the deficit of their comprehension. Reynolds mulled over a fresh cup of coffee, staring out the window as if it might reveal some greater truth. "This isn't right. Something about her makes me think there's more we're missing." He spoke into the space between them, tilting his head toward Mullins, who was cataloging files with practiced efficiency. "More than just missing," Mullins replied, his gaze steady, voice tempered by experience. "It's like trying to read between lines that haven't even been drawn yet." He paused, letting the room's ambient noise fill the gaps in their understanding. Detective Rain rejoined them soon afterward. His movements were defined, carrying the certainty of someone who had decided upon an objective. He leaned against the desk, holding their attention with a nod. "The lieutenant believes we might be dealing with something beyond our usual remit." His voice was quiet, ensuring his words were caught by their intended audience alone. "It's not just about the arrest. We need to figure out who she really is." "What do you suggest?" Reynolds asked, eager to channel the undercurrent of potential that had taken root since Tasha's arrival. Rain weighed his options. "We retrace her steps," he decided, though his tone conveyed that this action might only be scratching the surface. "Find her contacts, look for any sign that there's more at play. There's a depth to her story we haven't reached yet." As they settled into this commitment, their surroundings shifted softly in acknowledgement. Information was more than just data. It was an evolving narrative, prolonging beyond their immediate scope. Their task was akin to deep-sea diving, probing darker waters with hopes of surfacing greater understanding. Meanwhile, Tasha sat, the still epicenter of the precinct storm. Around her, officers whispered, conjectures spiraling into creative fictions that only added to the mythos of her silence. Though their dissonance reached her ears, her demeanor remained steadfast, a lighthouse unaffected by encroaching tides. Her mind revisited old rhythms, relics of operations where identity was liquid, poured into molds she innovated as required. Memories of distant lands, faces that shifted with the same uncertainty, mapped her conscience, echoing missions that molded who she'd become and sharpening her resolve amid the clutter. Beyond surveillance eyes, Rain requested records from the files scattered through forgotten archives. He awaited digital confirmations, the precinct's technology flickering in response to burgeoning inquiries. Each system return was a breadcrumb in a field of pathways, leading both closer to and more entertained by her mystery. Across town, surveillance cameras captured a city unaware of the unfolding curiosity emanating from their local precinct. Every street was a skein of interwoven stories, each passerby another thread in a complex urban loom. The city buzzed with life's unrelenting pace, yet here in this room, its heartbeat seemed inextricably linked to Tasha's own. Back within the confines of procedural expectation, Rain encountered another manifestation of doubt. Unintentionally, the shadows cast by his inquiries loomed longer. Each decision was tantamount to peeling back layers, one hesitation at a time, to expose an unanticipated core. Lieutenant Avery rejoined him in contemplation, sharing the tentative camaraderie shared by those prioritizing discovery over assumption. "Tell me we've found something," Avery prompted, his voice a practiced mix of authority and curiosity. "We're getting there," Rain replied, an assurance shaped less from knowledge than unwavering intent. "Her life's a puzzle, with all the pieces just out of reach." Avery nodded, sharing a glance that encapsulated their mutual resolve to untangle the web they found themselves entrapped within. Everyday choices were a right weft. Truth, their intended warp towards understanding and justice. Together, they resumed their vigil, eyes aligned to unseen horizons reflecting back the potential of understanding that lay beyond mere silence. Within these walls, a woman waited with more reliance on her unseen allies than acknowledged opponents. Now it was left to the detectives, charting their course into her mystery, hoping in the end the story they unraveled revealed something valuable about truth, identity, and justice. In their calculations, one thing became certain. Within this den of conclusion, truth whispered enough to guide them, if only they had the mind to listen. The digital glow from the computer screens cast an eerie light across Detective Rain's face as he delved deeper into the records. The precinct, normally loud with activity, was now a study in focused tension. His eyes scanned through various databases, searching through layers of information and disinformation, hoping to find a thread that would unravel the mystery surrounding Tasha Walker. "Anything yet?" Reynolds asked, leaning over Rain's shoulder, his voice a mix of curiosity and expectation. The question hung in the air like a detective novel line poised on the precipice of revelation. "Not much," Rain replied, frustration evident in the set of his jaw. "Her name doesn't match with any known associates outside of what already points to mundane places. Family connections seem sparse, and the rest are dead ends or diversions." Officer Mullins joined them, holding a new printout that flashed brightly with its freshness. "This just came through," he offered, handing the document over with the slightest tinge of hope. Every piece of paper was a potential key, yet most seemed irritated locks, leaving them adrift in shadows. Rain scanned the page, tracing lines of code that zigzagged between the known and unknown. The routine background checks had failed to reveal anything concrete, the kind of nothing that seasoned officers recognized as something. "Her past just doesn't add up," Rain said, more to himself than anyone else, feeling the undertow of fact-resistant revelations. "Maybe we're looking at it wrong," Reynolds suggested, pulling a chair to join their congregation. "We assume there's something in plain view, but maybe her life's more subterranean, like an iceberg." It was a summation more apt than Reynolds knew. Rain nodded, contemplating outwardly meaningless details sublimated by strategy. A bigger game in play. Tasha's life shadowed their preconceptions, deflecting inspection like light off still water under a tender sun. Lieutenant Avery re-entered the evolving investigation, bringing a shift in focus with him. "Any leads on associates?" he asked, knowing well enough that allies unseen could be both the least and most dangerous loose threads. "Not exactly," Rain replied, his gaze fixed as if willing the screen to disclose more than just fleeting fractions. Acquaintances were scant and appeared meticulously cultivated, their digital trails mirroring the transient footprints across shifting sands. At that moment, the monitor flickered just once, and then presented a ghost retrieval among its search results. Rain's hand paused, heartbeats synchronized with pulse and purpose. The link seemed benign, but resonated with undercurrents of something more. It pointed towards a series of intelligence briefings, not openly linked but coded in such manner that only those aware would comprehend. Rain hesitated, aware of boundaries not only judicial but societal, yet he clicked, unraveling what felt like threads of mystery entwined within intelligence. The screen before him translated into a reality where Tasha Walker stood not just as an individual, caught in systemic prejudice, but perhaps as a fulcrum to a larger unseen narrative. "Looks like some of these names might be more than they appear," Rain confided, drawing a compass not just around her, but across institutions whose reach exceeded standard precinct capacity. It made the case slippery yet concrete, a paradox wrapped in identity's duality. By Rain's side, Reynolds' eyes widened, the marrow of realization sinking deeper. Could she be some kind of agent? The word agent hung between them, a shrill note in the otherwise whisper-filled symphony of their shared understanding. "Maybe," Rain allowed, his words soft, eyes bright with the ramifications their imagination dared paint. It was a leap from conjecture to conscious inference, requiring balance on an unseen wire. In the room with Tasha sat alone with memories and resolve. Their discovery trembled at the edges of her presence, the precinct's fabric of assumptions recalibrated by the minute, adjusting its weft to accommodate burgeoning truths they hadn't anticipated moments before. She was a character in their ongoing drama, yet didn't realize this shift was the unwritten promise of truths now farmed to fruition, potential unearthed through the unrelenting tide of inquiry deployed alike. Strings had been played, and now even the most skeptical leaned closer, hanging on revelation's threshold. With quiet assurance, the precinct began recrafting its stance, a metamorphosis from seekers of answers to bearers of potential truth. Tasha's seeming opacity reframed itself not as confinement, but as liberation, letting the cast of investigators push beyond the known into alleys where secrets lie, waiting for recognition. As the precinct murmured, harbinger for change awakened, one individual shifted the paradigm. Often the most formidable allies step not from shadows but redefine silhouettes, as bystanders lean closer, caught in the thrall of understanding, almost within reach, yet exquisitely elusive. Here the game transitioned, the tables turned. What had been a routine arrest now stood as pivotal entrenchment and more emergence a call to war for truth, so fierce it sings as it bursts free. The precinct seemed a living entity, its air imbued with the buzz of suppressed excitement that fed off every whispered speculation and sidelong glance. While the formal order of procedure held, the pursuit of truth demanded officers navigate a novel terrain of uncertainty and intrigue. The screen's revelation had yet to fully process in Rain's mind, yet its implications resonated, eliciting an urgency that rippled through their rank. Agents and intelligence concepts, normally steeped in fiction, but one that now permeated their every discussion. Officer Reynolds stood apart, contemplating the boundaries delineated by his training boundaries. He felt strained under the weight of their emerging insight. Each officer had started rethinking their involvement in a case less about enforcement and more about revelation. But amidst the palpable transformation sweeps of suspicion, something more sinister brewed. A gathering storm rooted in the inconsistencies each officer uncovered in their pursuit of knowledge. Questions proliferated like invasive weeds. Why her? Why now? Why here? Mullins exhibited signs of unrest, brows knitting together in an involuntary concert, with the uncertainty pooling in the room. "This doesn't add up," he muttered, half to himself, half to anyone willing to acknowledge the fractures splintering their once clear narrative. A sense lingered. The disjointed puzzle pieces refused to settle into a coherent picture. They all felt it, the shared sense that amongst the mundane reports, something crucial had been omitted or obfuscated. As they delved deeper, voices lowered to whispers, like a conspiratorial hum provoking dormant imaginings of betrayal. "Do you feel that?" Reynolds asked cautiously, unwilling to voice the thoughts creeping into his mind, a sort of supervised paranoia bred by the unknowns that enveloped their case like fog. "I do," Rain acknowledged, his mind racing to tether the threads borne by their gathered insights. "It feels like every answer we get opens up 3 more questions, but the darkness is where we find clarity," he added, drawing on an old axiom that seemed apt for navigating the current of their rapidly changing landscape. In a separate office, records stacked high, Lieutenant Avery reviewed correspondences, communications not bound by their precinct's immediate domain. A minute curiosity beckoned him into external data networks, his endeavors sustained by the realization that Tasha's case had possessed intricacies he hadn't foreseen. Lines pinpointed her name among blurred lists and censored entries, the hallmarks of a history intertwined with intelligence agencies, cloaked in bureaucratic discretion. How deep did her connections go? How far did they extend beyond the arrest's immediate purview? A sudden epiphany seized Reynolds as he pieced together incongruous data points and cryptic intercourses that described Tasha's life beyond their records. "It's like she's a ghost," he mused aloud, the metaphor capturing the essence of Tasha's pervasive anonymity, both a shield and a testament to a life lived in the periphery of overt observation. Yet every new discovery compounded their frustration within a system designed intentionally to obscure rather than reveal significant truths. Each potential lead felt like a cul-de-sac, a trap for their deductive reasoning that defied prevailing convention. Upon reflection, though confined by walls and silence, Tasha Walker sat composed, her quiet assurance juxtaposed against their growing desperation. Somewhere between observation and silence, she wielded influence more decisive than any confrontation, compelling the precinct toward a truth of profound consequence. For Rain and his team, each realization brought textures of understanding not just of her existence, but of the roles shadows played behind masks. Intrigue and mystery meshed within the precinct, among officers turned amateur sleuths engaging in self-directed discovery. As the detectives convened once more, their determination was tinged with respect, a complicit acknowledgement among them that they were playing a part in someone else's grander narrative, crafting a new story not just of enforcement, but of emergence. In that room, beneath the pretense of simplicity, lay the epicenter of complex narratives, each revelation swaying the perceived power dynamics more definitively. What remained were reflections on resilience and discretion, the character markers that reframed not just their perceptions of Tasha Walker, but of themselves. Before them appeared spectral tendrils of clarity, authoring itself daily in recognition of identities instead of mere names. From the edges, a truth emerged, iterated in silence, but articulated in echo, a testament to the resilience encased in quiet power and fortified by unseen influence. The precinct, once ablaze with urgency, now grew tentative, shadows bathed in reflective circumspection. Within those mirrored corridors, officers grappled with insights. The truth remained shrouded, but it now had a face, one reflecting not merely executable commands, but crucial understanding. And as silence folded into its familiar patterns, a promise lingered in the precinct's echoes. One day the truth would emerge, entire and unadorned, unveiled not just by practice, but by necessity. This understanding, once suppressed, revealed itself elegantly. All secrets exist in wait, leaving behind a lesson so simple yet profound. The heart of discovery beats loudest under hushed tones. As the precinct hummed with the subdued tension of an investigation turning inward, the arrival of a simple envelope disrupted its rhythm. It sat unassuming, its plain veneer belied by the aura of significance that seemed to emanate from it. It had been delivered urgently, the words, "To be opened by Detective Rain," hastily scrawled across its surface in ink that bled slightly, like drops of intrigue merging with a pageant of revelation. Rain, curious and cautious, took the envelope from the hands of the officer who brought it. Its weight seemed disproportionate to its size, a communication tactile with hidden profundity. Inside, a folded paper brimmed with covert potential, hiding an emblem that sent an electric thrill along his spine when revealed. An agency insignia, the CIA's crest, plain as day. The room paused in its motions, focused on Rain's unfolding tale of the unexpected laying beneath bureaucracy's skin. The officers around him felt it too, the sudden shift in their narrative, the arrest's escalation into an entanglement with federal dimensions. "What's that?" Reynolds asked, almost forgetting to mask his curiosity behind professional decorum. The question underscored the surprise rippling across the precinct floor like a pebble initiating grand waves on a placid lake. "It's something official," Rain replied thoughtfully, as fingers traced over formal language framing the letter's content. It was full of legalese detailing an inquiry, but was more significant for what it didn't say, hints laced into bureaucratic syntax, gesture more than articulate fact. Summary paragraphs spoke of a scope beyond their immediate investigation, couching their inquiry within a hierarchy unfamiliar, yet surreptitiously pervasive, a subtle directive dressed in polite suggestion, compelling Rain's team toward a broader understanding. "Walker's not just a name, she's a designation," Rain inferred, connecting the dots in a mental map reshaped by the letter in his hands. "This changes things. She's protected by layers we might not even want to uncoil." Mullins, who'd been quietly scrutinizing, spoke up, his voice invested with newfound recognition. "Could be the guys upstairs have been playing chess while we've been shooting marbles." Rain nodded, the analogy apt for the continuum revealed here, a game within games, nested like Russian dolls, each layer another depth unplumbed until now. Every past assumption felt shadowed by misdirection, obfuscations played out under presumption's guise. Lieutenant Avery, informed by Rain's findings, approached with an aura of tempered authority, perceptibly acquainted with implications' double-edged realm. "We need to tread carefully," he counseled. "This isn't just a record check anymore. It's more like an approach and observe operation." But still, more than uncertain protocol, what struck Rain was the deeper revelation. Surfaces, once palimpsest with perceived identities, had evolved into canvases etched in concealment's intricate art. The room reverted to a low hum of conjectural melody. A few officers broke away, retreating into corners with their contemplation born of speculative inference, allegiance, perhaps, informing each sigh's rebound. Within the interrogation room, Tasha Walker remained composed, her silence transforming perception at every beat. The shift from passive observer to active participant now lay beneath her fingers as she held awareness of their search, invisible and profound, a witness to the limits clashing with recognition. Outside, beneath the steel and glass expanse of the city, alliances unknown sought recognition. Whisper networks entailed processes both visceral and intangible. Every corner unveiled new characters threading through their investigation, connected by digital threads but separated by dimensions of understanding. For Rain, information blossomed in kaleidoscopic forms, their incongruity aligning into blurred outlines of acknowledgement. Though chilled with responsibility, there was also an invigorating undercurrent, acknowledging the possibilities awoken within these discoveries carried its own excitement. As the precinct adjusted to this larger purview, Rain and his team gathered, understanding beginning to ripple throughout like concentric circles across calm waters. Each officer contributed insights unique to their perspective, their collective dedication rekindled as awareness reshaped intent. In that unassuming paper, folded and refolded, Rain saw the emblem less as an end but a beginning, a declaration inscribed not with finality but possibility, a reminder that sometimes all it takes to shift perception is a symbol combining protocols and secrets, catalyzed by a truth left just shy of forgetfulness. For the precinct, now less a setting than an active participant, the implications of today would resonate, weaving new patterns that would redefine relationships, both personal and professional, a reflection in many ways of the indefinable brilliance Tasha's presence had bestowed. And so they stayed, rooted in their present, poised on brinkings, yet undiscovered. Reassessments unfolded not just of the case, but of their own place within its cavernous understanding. Here stood the threshold of what was known, within reach now, fingers brushing a future's unguarded warmth. The bridge from certainty to potential. For Tasha Walker, the story continued, riding the edge of revelation, a future sculpted within the silence that lingered in the history unwritten, yet palpitating with promise. The game had indeed shifted, and its complexities promised a saga spun vividly across unfamiliar terrain, where secrets subside and trust. In the quiet solitude of the interrogation room, Tasha Walker remained a portrait of calm amidst the chaos converging beyond its walls. Her mind wandered through the corridors of time, revisiting memories born in shadows and nurtured in clandestine operations that traded fear for fortitude. There was a distant town, forever coated in dust, where as a young recruit she'd cut her teeth and learned the craft of concealment. That place had been both a crucible and a refuge, pulling her deeper into the folds of secretive work. The faces of nameless mentors flashed through her mind, their lessons trapped in the recesses of her memory, whispering reminders of resilience and resolve. "Imagine the possibilities," one mentor had said, gesturing broadly to the horizon as they stood on top of a hill overlooking the sprawling town. "Where others see a shadow, we must see a path." Her path from that distant initiation to this room was not linear, but rather a tapestry woven with intentions other than simplicity. Every mission had honed her skills, each identity adopted and discarded like autumn leaves drifting with the wind. Yet at the center of this labyrinthine journey lay a singular truth, her unwavering commitment to a cause larger than herself. Tasha's upbringing had been defined by contrasts, nurtured by a familial love, grounded in values and sacrifice, but also a harsh world that didn't hesitate to cast judgment based on the color of her skin. Yet each slight, each doubted intention had become stepping stones, laying the foundation for her impenetrable demeanor. That resolve was forged not in anger, but in the strength of self-awareness. Back in the precinct, Detective Rain's team continued unraveling her enigma, propelled by the disclosures the CIA insignia had set aflame. Leads formed and faded, each pathway ephemeral yet crucial, a dance as intricate as the cover she'd maintained. Rain found himself reflecting on the unpredictable shifts of justice, drawn to Tasha's circumstance not just as an investigator, but as a cautious admirer of her mastery. Her courage was latent, expressed not overtly, but in the subtleties others overlooked, a whisper of influence felt in rooms even when she wasn't present. Reconciling Tasha's identity with her agency affiliations presented challenges as diverse as they were profound. Official channels were less conduits of clarity and more gateways to enforced obscurity. Directions pointed less to facts than to possibilities shaded with ambiguity. Mullins, scrutinizing a report, shared a telling glance at Reynolds. "Do you ever wonder," he began, "how many we've seen like her who slipped right through, not because they're invisible, but because we forgot where to look?" Reynolds nodded, processing each revelation as if receiving for the first time a language of intent they'd spent years trying to master. Each officer now considered that they'd overlooked depth for detail, a resonant reminder amid the mundanities that routinely cloaked their work. Meanwhile, as Rain's fingers danced across keyboards and flowed through files, the narratives of identity and justice became entangled, each discovery speaking of a world under the surface where intent and identity were fluid concepts defined by context rather than singular event. Above in the precinct, clouds gathered outside the windows, their shadows shifting across desks and hallways. They mirrored the growing unease within, a prelude to a revelation poised to strike between forethought and circumstance. Through the conference rooms, voices mingled in philosophical debates on culpability and ethics, with officers confronting biases, reevaluating intuitions cast without conscious malice, reflecting new insight observed through Tasha's silent defiance. And yet in this suspended animation of reevaluation, the rhythm of justice carried on. Rain held fast to each fact, integrating within his grasp, as if remapping not just a profile, but the confluence of pasts and futures whose intersections promised insight transcending circumstance or serendipity. Within the confines of inquiry, internal dialogues blended with the broader discourse, each conversation tailoring and weaving together the story beneath the narrative they understood or thought they had until now. They recognized pieces which refracted, revealing dimensions uncharted yet unavoidable. Understanding had become an ally, bending perspective toward truths less tangible, but all the more potent because they defied definition. For Reynolds, Mullins, and the others, the experience transcended the arrest itself, reshaping their understanding of interaction and influence, where every motion crafted a new thread across the human tapestry. As shadows lengthened into evening and lamplight shuddered to life around the precinct, knowledge, illuminated by discovery, etched a path laid not by mere instinct but by clarity, intertwined with the nuances of identity, resistance, and the stories revealed when perception marries with empathy. And as the precinct pulsed with life, each heartbeat cast its own ripple of resonance among the unheard echoes. Tasha Walker existed not within the enclosure of a room, but between light and shadow, an unwavering testament to the quiet revelations waiting beneath the veneer of silence. Her story lived on, a beacon poised against the edge of tomorrow's dawn, awaiting to meld solitary struggle with collaborative justice. The precinct's atmosphere, if possible, seemed to constrict and expand simultaneously, as whispers of Tasha Walker's potential affiliations reverberated throughout its halls. There was a tension, a tangible buzz in the air. Even those who had started the day steeped in routine felt the pull of hidden narratives unfurling in their midst. Detective Rain, steeped in the moment's gravity, scanned the now familiar conference room. The walls seemed to pulsate with secrets, eagerly hovering on the cusp of discovery. His team assembled around him, each bearing an expression marked by the day's revelations. The shared silence among them was not empty, but laden with unspoken readiness for unseen truths lying just out of reach. As discussion swirled, fragments of hushed conversations attempted to flesh out the ghost at the center of their inquiry. The CIA's indirect acknowledgement had altered everything, urging them toward a crossroads where duty was tempered with care for discovery's weight. They couldn't ignore the weight of the shadows cast by their looming epiphanies. "We've got to deal with the implications," Rain said finally, breaking the pause, compelling them back to the pragmatic realities of their roles. "We owe it to ourselves to understand what we're up against, who we're dealing with, really." Lieutenant Avery nodded, his gaze taking in the team with a note of anticipation. More than an investigator, Avery understood the dimensions of caution and courage that needed navigation in equal measure. "We act carefully," he said. "There are implications here larger than just our jurisdiction." Rain turned toward Reynolds, who was poring over the network of lines and hierarchies they'd begun mapping, forming something more like a web than a checklist. "Is there anything specific that stands out about Walker's contacts?" Reynolds sifted through the static of data, blended with potential names meckling into larger patterns. "Names don't stand out so much as the spaces between them," he noted, tapping on one particular thread. "Connections are hinted at, implied rather than outright named, like she's woven through them, not beside." A collective understanding passed between the officers. The recognition that Tasha lived within intersections, her life less a linear path than a kaleidoscope of situational adaptation. Each pivot turned less by designation than necessity. They were closing in on something much larger, pulling together threads in a tapestry not fully seen, but whose brilliance they began to fathom in impressionistic glimpses. The presence of the agency's symbol on the letters transformed mere conjecture into a realignment of their investigation, a shift from seeking guilt to understanding perspective. Back in her holding room, Tasha remained a vigilant specter of composure. Her stillness radiated an energy the precinct felt at its core, like tremors preceding a volcanic eruption. Meanwhile, her past spun out in complex patterns she wore with defiant certainty. Tasha's mind wandered to the maze of identities she'd navigated, each a world unbounded by the usual parameters of definition. Her agency work had taught her the equal necessity of presence and absence, each mask a tool unto its purpose, just as much an offense as a defense. In another life, under different circumstances, perhaps the eyes of a younger Tasha would have regarded her current situation with apprehension, but the woman she had become had learned to construct opportunities from fragments others discarded. Each officer in the precinct orbited Tasha like celestial bodies. Collectively, they held this moment, a dance choreographed by latent understanding, with each member a star at varying distances from truths in nascent formation. The air in the room with Tasha was static charged with potential. Should she choose to speak now, she could guide their understanding in nuanced brushstrokes across the palimpsest of her life. But silence as ever was her reserve, her silent negotiator in a forum where authority and autonomy continued their silent duel. "Is it possible," Mullins ventured, "that she's protecting something or someone? Maybe she's waiting for our hand before she shows hers." These words hung like a question asked in prayer, a possibility always present, a secret mutual agreement waiting for the right moment of clarity to manifest. Rain, collecting these insights, felt again the ineffable pull of assurance, a force less from peripherals than a core understanding. It might be that protecting herself is secondary, he speculated, eyes narrowing to visualize an answer they all sought. Meanwhile, through carefully disseminated call patterns and messages encased in bureaucratic prose, it had become clear Tasha's life was both an open book and a closed one, volumes reliant on the reader's discernment. Each line both foreground and subterfuge. For Tasha, secrets held were not merely burdens to carry, but allies' silhouettes that framed her thoughts as they crafted possibilities amid doubt's icy grasp. As the precinct settled toward evening, a stillness emerged as Rain's team processed a mosaic fast approaching clarity, the weight of responsibility tempered with a deeper understanding. Justice was not a fixed entity, but a myriad of truths awaiting illumination by the human spirit's light. Tasha's presence in their midst had sparked this journey, each revelation an inversion and rehearsal in the art of introspection and extrapolation of meaning. And in their newfound awareness, what lay hidden now rose to the surface, demanding not just pursuit, but comprehension. As dusk crept in, casting long shadows across the precinct, the air thrummed with potential. The precinct was now a living, breathing theater of anticipation. News of Tasha Walker's purported affiliations hadn't just sparked curiosity, it had lit a beacon of urgency, attracting conversations like moths to flame. Detective Rain stood at the epicenter of this burgeoning revelation. He felt the weight of the envelope's contents in his coat pocket, an unassuming reminder of the layers yet to be peeled back. With Lieutenant Avery at his side, they shared a wordless understanding, a dance perfected over years in service, where verbal exchanges gave way to instincts honed in the fires of experience. The time had come to press forward. Rain gathered his team, the room a reflection of the decisions about to be made as they prepared to engage with a mystery now intimate yet seemingly infinite. The weight of anticipation was a physical presence, like the hum before a breaking storm. "We've got to address the elephant in the room," Rain began, breaking the silence with measured tones that reverberated against the tension charged between them. "We know Tasha isn't just a bystander in whatever operation she's linked to. Her arrest wasn't just a matter of being in the wrong place at the wrong time." Mullins leaned forward, elbows on knees, his expression a mix of conviction and curiosity. "You think she's undercover?" Rain considered the question, weaving together the answers through the fabric of their investigation. "That's becoming increasingly likely," he replied, "which means we need to tread carefully. We're not just dealing with an arrest, we're potentially cross-headed into something more significant." Lieutenant Avery nodded, eyes tracing the documents laid out before him. "Our next steps need to be coordinated. We require more insight, more direct intelligence." In the hushed corners outside their discussion, the rest of the precinct seemed to echo a low murmur, an audio testament to the gravity of unspoken realization. Reynolds, struck by the implications of Rain's suggestions, pushed forward a file. "Here's what we need to do," he ventured, the document capturing details of their current leads, names, places, connections scratched out like points of interest on a clandestine map. "We triangulate our findings, double-check existing files, anything that guides us closer without compromising her or us." Outside, the city lived out its ordinary yet profound rhythms. Beyond the walls of discussion and supposition, life continued, unaware of the circles retraced in pursuit of Tasha's truth. It was a reminder of the world's complexity and its inherent dissonance, where realities folded into themselves, often unnoticed beneath the surface. Through the ebb and flow of possibility, Rain glanced over at Avery, who nodded, the acknowledgement lingering between them, a silent affirmation of trust, one formed amidst years of warfare waged against the precinct's rhythm altered. Computers pinged softly, their electronic confirmations echoing Rain's directives. Officers paged through records, digital fingerprints woven into the larger tapestry of investigative pursuit. They knew they stood at a precipice, not just professional but moral, where action was weighted by intent and consequence. Tasha Walker, through this recalibration, maintained her silent watch from within the interrogation room, a guardian of her own story, both participant and author, in the evolving drama outside her temporal confines. She sensed the shift in the air, a familiar sensation, an understanding that the next move lay not with manipulation, but revelation. For her, life had unfolded in strategic layers, each plan a prism of intent observed through the kaleidoscope of identity's multiplicity. She had deconstructed life's patterns and abstracted purpose where others might only have seen routine. That skill had borne her through dangers both seen and cloaked in shadow. Inside her thoughts, Moments relived echoed the echoes of reassurance, the bends of experience mapping a territory defined by perseverance. Those memories were more than remembrances. They were pathways paved with intention. As the precinct settled, each moment edging closer to a decision, Rain addressed his team one more time. The plan was set. Each action, yet cautious, embedded with intent. "We proceed with what we've got," he said, gesturing to the document now well worn with handling. "Let's see where the truth leads." The precinct doors swiveled with purpose as the team dispersed into the evening gloom, the essence of their mission woven beneath the buzz of city life. Every departure swore allegiance to resolution, not just within the precinct, but within the self and acceptance that often the true mastery of discovery lay bound in patience, perception, and perseverance. And so, with the night unfolding, their pursuit continued, driven by whispered promises of uncovering truths dormant beneath the arrest, beneath the day, beneath Tasha's own crafted silence. In the span between revelation and decision lay the heart of darkness, across which they all walked, guided by the beacon of hidden understanding, each step igniting the path to knowing. They moved with dedication, unfaltered by the shadows that grew long, always toward illumination. For Tasha, the evening was an awakening met with the insight of purpose. She remained steady within, her story a vessel barely contained within the precinct's transient ambiance, a reflection upon walls, vibrated with the resonance of unfolding truths. Night had taken hold of the city, draping it in a shroud that concealed and revealed with equal measure. The precinct's interior bore witness to the quiet determination of its occupants. An understanding had settled among the officers that Tasha Walker was not merely a detainee, she was a catalyst, her presence foundational yet transformative to their purpose. Among the offices and hallways, a kind of symbiotic anticipation developed. Officers who had been absorbed in their routines felt the new energy coursing through the precinct, as if every fiber of the building was leaning forward, hushed and awaiting the next act in an unfolding drama. At the heart of it all, in a room that had become her sanctuary and her theater, Tasha Walker sat still, silent, yet undeniably present. The truth of her identity, cloaked in ambiguity, loomed large on either side of her. She was a specter of unspoken influence, the embodiment of subtle power reserved for those who understood its currency. Yet, she was not entirely alone in spirit. For Rain and his team, the deeper layers of Tasha's narrative were becoming increasingly apparent. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that allies existed within their ranks, not easily recognizable, but intricately linked to the precise moment they were in. Detective Rain steered his focus back to his team. Through the window blinds, the dim glow of streetlights framed them in a delicate lattice of hope and purpose. Each officer had become acutely aware of their role in this expanding tableau, one woven into their pursuit of deeper truths. "This changes everything," Rain mused, almost to himself, though loud enough to capture the room's attention. "She's not here by mistake. She might even be here on her own terms." Reynolds nodded, lips pursed in contemplation. "If she's conducting her own operation, then our part might be in knowing when to step back, not just when to act." The conversation circled back to Tasha's past, a mosaic of identities now mapped out in the form spread before them. Her name, once an unknown adorned by suspicion, now carried a gravity informed by possibilities they'd considered only in theory. Lieutenant Avery entered with a deliberate stride, joining the assembly with the seasoned discernment of someone who had danced the edge of revelation more times than most. His eyes, taking in each of the team's expressions, spoke volumes. "She's likely got allies outside, too," he offered, his tone firm, yet wrapped in the softness of acknowledgement. "Every action we take must consider that." His words resonated deeply. The scope was now undeniably widened. Alliances imagined and real threaded through every decision they might advance or retreat upon. Meanwhile, outside the precinct, the city pulsed with a life of its own. Those who passed by, unaware, were twined invisibly into the narrative's fabric, a testament to the unseen interconnectedness that epitomized urban life. Street lamps flickered on, casting their glow upon faces eager for tomorrow's promises, mirroring the saga within the precinct's walls. Back in her room, Tasha's mind drifted to moments of choice and action. Decisions laced like fine threads into her consciousness. Allies she'd worked with across continents felt close at hand, their presence a reassurance born of shared purpose and unspoken commitments. Rain took a slow, sweeping glance around the room, measuring the resolve in their posture and intent. "So, what do we do?" he prompted, each word a light added to the carousel of decision spiraling before them. Mullins leaned forward, his voice calm but confident. "We engage her. Maybe it's time to let her know that we're not just here to act upon her, but alongside her, if the path leads there." With a nod, Rainey processed the proposal, recognizing its potential to transcend enforcement and reach into collaboration. A collaboration that might offer the clearest insights yet. The shared understanding redefined their mission's parameter. Possibility rimmed each word exchanged. The precinct, now not merely a place of detention and revelation, but one of intention and understanding. Tasha Walker's presence, once an enigma diffusing influence and speculation in equal measure, had matured into an opportunity for bond not merely between officers, but with the fabric of narrative and identity. As they prepared to engage her, every pulse beat with the realization that justice was far more nuanced than rules adhered to or assumptions unchecked. It was about the connections made and identities acknowledged, reflections of a deeper truth, one shaped within silence, yet eloquent in its design. And so they gathered their resolve, steeling themselves for the next conversation, one where allies within and beyond might become visible. In this interconnected landscape, Tasha Walker represented more than just a narrative thread. She illuminated the broader weave of justice and identity, eke a testament to their shared humanity, crafted with care and intention, poised to speak volumes in the silence. As the precinct settled into the quiet hum of late-night activity, paths were traced deliberately toward the room where Tasha Walker held her silent vigil. This was more than just an inquiry. It felt like an overture to revelation. Detective Rain stood at the threshold momentarily, letting the atmosphere shape itself around him, preparing for the next step in their delicate ballet. Rain entered with understanding in his stride, a visual manifestation of the shift from contention to potential alliance. He was closely followed by Lieutenant Avery and a couple of other officers who had become part of this nuanced engagement, their faces a tableau of respect and quiet anticipation. In the illuminated confines of the room, Tasha sat forward, her presence commanding without effort. Her eyes, dark pools of unspoken wisdom, met Rain's with a steady gaze that acknowledged both the struggle and the hope woven into their shared narrative. "Ms. Walker," Avery began, lending gravity to her name, a name now fully realized with significance rippling beyond these walls. "We believe there's more than meets the eye here, both for you and for us," Rain continued, his voice a calm counterpoint to the swirl of potential energy in the room. "We understand this might not be a simple matter, and we're beginning to see that perhaps you're not alone in this. Context matters. And if you're open to it, we'd like to understand more beyond the confines of what's written." Tasha remained silent for a moment, letting their words settle into the space between action and intention. Her mind, a cathedral of thought and memory, turned over the instances of trust, hard-won and carefully tended, as she evaluated this invitation for earnestness. "It's possible," Tasha said slowly, her voice surprising them with its considered weight, a metronome resetting the pulse of their collective investigation. "That understanding isn't just something we achieve alone. Sometimes it's a tapestry of our actions and beliefs, woven tighter with time." Her response, simple yet profound, hung in the air like a keystone in the archway of their mutual understanding. The officers knew they were receiving more than just words. They were accepting Tasha's recognition of their reach and willingness to bridge gaps. "That's what we're hoping for," Rain answered, assured now that a dialogue was not just possible, but necessary, a dialogue transcending procedural measures into alliance and acknowledgement. Around the table, The officers eased into their roles not as enforcers but as partners in unveiling the narrative threads strung across Tasha's history. They each felt part of something larger than themselves, a recognition of their own humanity mirrored within the stories they'd glimpsed in her unyielding resolve. Tasha continued, allowing her own enigma some shape. "In my work," she said, choosing each word with care, "discretion isn't about secrecy. It's about stewardship. There's a difference between being seen and being understood, and we live between those lines." Her declaration, unassuming yet purposeful, reflected the intricate dance between self and service. Enlightenment glimpsed through the storm's eye they've circled. Reynolds, standing quietly at the back, felt the invocation like a whispered truth, inviting him to question his biases, a reminder that justice wasn't binary, but a spectrum wherein identity unraveled its power, not in solitude, but solidarity. Lieutenant Avery absorbed this, nodding, a diplomat within their shared venture where every word, every choice marked their path forward differently than any case prior. They weren't just parsing information, but dipping into the well of human experience, drawing empathy and insight aligned with justice. "Then let's proceed together, Ms. Walker," Avery concluded, his tone both formal and familiar, a rare synthesis for those engaged in delicacies of multi-layered truths. The room felt lighter then, the air infused with a shared vow that marked not merely a point in their investigation, but a new direction instilled with promise and potential. Tasha's acknowledgement was a waypoint, a compass, drawing lines not for division but for convergence. In that moment, the precinct became more than an institution of enforcement. It was a vessel of gradual peace, crafting bonds through understanding, transforming a night of doubt into a dawn of possibilities. They were each bound not only by role but choice, and the realization that every action was imbued with echoes of stories yet fully told. As they settled back toward their tasks, newly invigorated, uniquely inspired, Rain saw Tasha anew. Not just as an agent or an enigma, but as a narrative turning the pages toward truth, fostered in patience and articulated in hope. When the room emptied of its newfound allies, Tasha's remained effortlessly poised, reflecting once more upon the fabric of her life's tapestry, a blend of shadows and light, where the unstated bore compassions well woven into the heart of existence. Outside the precinct, tended by the echoes of their shaping conversations, the city took note. Unseen eyes blinked open in the quiet acknowledgement of their undertakings, anchored not to the known, but tomorrow's yet unveiled understanding. Tasha's presence, an enduring beacon promising transition within silence's tapestry, now destined to speak. As dawn began its soft descent upon the city, the precinct lay shrouded in a profound stillness, one that spoke not of inactivity but of contemplation. The quiet murmur of voices had given way to a reflective hush, wrapping around the events of the night like a gentle fog. Detective Rain found himself alone for a moment in the break room, the steam of his morning coffee curling upwards, dissipating into the early light filtering through the window. It was a rare pause, a chance to collect the myriad thoughts scattered across the canvas of the past hours. Every revelation, every question exchanged with Tasha Walker felt like a step further into clarity, yet also deeper into complexity. The precinct was slowly waking up, officers returning and greeting the new day with hushed conversations that barely disturbed the calm. Their shared endeavor with Tasha Walker had brought about a subtle shift in mindset and in perspective. Each officer seemed to carry themselves with a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet dignity that infused their steps with intention. In the corridor outside Rain's office, Reynolds and Mullins talked in low tones, their words woven with the understanding that this was more than just a case. It was an exploration of self, a journey into their own perceptions. They'd started to see justice not as an endpoint but as a living conversation, evolving with every truth they unearthed. Tasha, though still seated in the same room, felt the difference within the precinct, a change in the air, in the very way officers looked at her. Where once they saw only the image of a detainee, now they looked with eyes that recognized the layers within her story, a mutual appreciation forged in the crucible of shared experience. The world outside moved in rhythmically predictable cycles, but within these walls, something had altered, leaving imprints of possibility where uncertainty had reigned. Tasha's presence had been a catalyst, a silent teacher ushering them into the deeper pools of empathy and understanding. Her thoughts turned inward, reminiscing on the missions that had shaped her being. Each operation was a story etched in time, a testament to adaptability and silent strength. She contemplated her journey, how every identity assumed became a piece of the mosaic that was now her life. Back in the precinct, Rain returned to the work at hand. He scanned through files and records, each page a chapter in a continuously unfolding narrative. There was a sense of anticipation, a thread weaving its way into the fabric of their collective understanding. As minutes passed and shadows retreated in the growing light, Lieutenant Avery joined Rain, his expression a portrait of calm assurance. "It's not just a case anymore, is it?" Avery mused, the question rhetorical, laced with the certainty of revelation. "We've opened something more," Rain agreed, reflecting on the shared journey of insight they'd undertaken. "What we found here, in her story, it changes the way we view our responsibility to the people who enter these walls." The precinct felt it, this change. A new chapter had unfolded, dissatisfaction with preconceived fairness transforming into an acceptance of complexity. Officers moved with renewed resolve, understanding that each interaction promised the potential for justice not yet realized. And as dawn extended its gentle tendrils over the cityscape, Tasha Walker rose to greet the day, no longer just a figure within its walls, but a symbol of the transformative power of presence and the silent strength of truth revealed at its own pace. The precinct exhaled a soft, collective breath of reckoning and recommitment. The city continued its waking, framed in the first light of clarity, casting away the shadow of ambiguity. Within this sacred and mundane confluence, where past met potential in limitless understanding, the echo of transformation lingered softly, like the whisper of a promise made and kept. And the city exhaled. The precinct was a hive of subdued activity, each officer moving with newly found intent, their previous night's musings transforming into tangible resolve. Outside, the small assembly of demonstrators continued to grow, their chorus of chants rising steadily, echoing against the austere structure of the precinct. Detective Rain watched from the window, an unspoken question hovering in the air between him and the bustling scene beyond the glass, a reminder of the implicit contract between law enforcement and the community it served. The faces in the crowd were varied, a reflection of the city itself, but united in their pursuit of transparency and fairness. Inside, Tasha Walker's presence had rippled through every layer of the precinct, challenging perceptions and illuminating unseen pathways. Her case had transcended the personal to become emblematic of broader societal issues, acting as a prism through which justice and bias were examined with refreshed vigor. In the precinct's narrow corridors, discussions expanded into dialogues, officers finding themselves reconsidering not only the specifics of Tasha's story, but the broader context of their interactions with the world beyond their back. The silent teachings of Tasha's demeanor had sparked an unprecedented willingness to listen, a vital step beyond mere observation. Mullins and Reynolds, part of a generation caught between tradition and transformation, found themselves grappling with questions of identity and justice in ways their training manuals had never covered. Their quiet conversations now slipped into thoughtful explorations, how assumptions clouded judgment, and how silence could serve not as concealment but as contemplation. Downstairs in the precinct, the phones buzzed intermittently, bringing in news of expressions of solidarity from other precincts and civic groups recognizing the deeper current stirred by Tasha's case. Messages of support underlined the importance of this moment, a collective acknowledgement of the need for measured progress and fearless truth. Lieutenant Avery convened the team in a conference room, its walls now more familiar, imbued with shared purpose. The conversation sparked anew, informed by the convergence of voices inside the room, outside the precinct, across the city, demanding more of their justice system than it had asked of them before. "We're riding a wave of change," Avery said, his voice serene yet strong. "What we've learned here transcends what we do this day. It's about shaping our roles in a broader narrative of understanding and accountability." Everyone nodded, acknowledging the profound responsibility born not from obligation but from awakened conscience. They were not alone. Each community member lent their voice to this dialogue, an enduring cry for justice that lingered within and beyond these walls. Meanwhile, Tasha sat watching the activity unfold. Her intuition had guided her to this precipice of revelation, a place where silence had prepared the ground for the seeds of understanding to be sown. What lay before her was not just the prospect of freedom, but of shared enlightenment, empathy forged from recognition that human stories held the keys to collective redemption. The energy outside continued to build, the demonstrators' presence metabolizing into a peaceful, hopeful march, symbolizing both mirroring and challenging the spirit of systemic change they sought to embody. Rain returned to his desk, endless tasks filtered through new awareness, mirroring the shift happening within. There was potential here for reformation, an opportunity for law and life to meet not as adversaries, but collaborators, building bridges over previously uncharted water. The precinct's evolution was underway, its focus realigned to serve something greater than its own understanding. A movement advocating for justice as woven from the narratives of all its people, law enforcers included. The city's landscape, etched with history and promise, witnessed this unfolding drama. The sounds of demonstrations, strangers uniting with shared purpose, filled the air with a sense of hope, carving new channels for rivers of understanding to flow through. As daylight bathed the city in warm tones of transformation, Detective Rain and his team embraced their responsibilities. They had started on a new path, empathetic in its reach, courageous in its scope. Together, with Tasha as both participant and guide, they journeyed toward a narrative waiting to enact itself, not within the confines of an arrest report, but through the fabric of change. This dance with truth, ignited by Tasha, had struck a chord, a melancholy crescendo of silent strength and vocal unity that promised a brighter, more inclusive dawn. Inside the precinct, the atmosphere simmered with a mix of anticipation and introspection. The morning sun, now higher in the sky, cast sharp lines of light across the floor, accentuating the engineered solemnity of the building. Each illuminated line seemed to represent a choice or a path, some yet untaken, others firmly underfoot. Detective Rain found himself back in the dingy confines of his office, engrossed in the mosaic of evidence and information before him. The revelations of the past 24 hours had shifted his paradigm, and he now approached his work with a profound sense of duty, not merely to the law, but to the people entangled within its structures. The precinct buzzed like a living entity, officers moving with renewed vigor. The lingering effects of Tasha Walker's arrest continued to ripple outward, like waves sprawling from a single stone cast into still water. Her presence had unlocked a necessary introspection within each officer, an acknowledgement that understanding and justice were not synonymous but complementary forces in the pursuit of fairness. Mullins and Reynolds, synthesizing the events, found themselves in deep contemplation in the break room. Their conversation reflected a newfound awareness, shaped by Tasha's quiet strength and their own internal reconciliations. Theirs was not the easy path of acceptance, but the challenging road of transformation. "This is more than just a wake-up call," Mullins stated, leaning back in his chair, his gaze fixed somewhere between the moment and his memories. "We talk about justice, but how often do we actually get it right?" Reynolds nodded slowly. "Every case, every person. It's a chance to do better, to be better. Tasha's case, it showed me how much I didn't know, how much I still have to learn. Their dialogue was a microcosm of the broader choir of voices resonating within the precinct, a symphony of reflective justice rewoven through discourse and action. Meanwhile, the gathering outside continued its measured escalation. The demonstrators, with their voices a cadence of harmony and resistance, represented more than solidarity with Tasha Walker. They gave voice to the continuum of countless stories, interwoven with identities that demanded recognition across the city and beyond. The police, spectators within their own walls, began to see their role not in creating distance but in bridging gaps, as custodians of both order and compassion. The precinct served as a focal point for a community seeking more than verdicts and penalties. They longed for understanding, aligning with an earnest call for reform. With every cheer and chant echoing from the park across the street, there was an unspoken appeal for systemic introspection, a reminder that the role of the officer was not just as enforcer but as protector and advocate. It was a collective expectation evolving into shared commitment. Inside, the precinct's command meeting resumed in full swing, Rain and Avery orchestrating a cohesive response. Informed by the preceding day's lesson, each officer in attendance recognized their place in this evolving narrative, a story they now wrote together, pen in hand, accepting the ink of their truth. "We're learning from this," Rain said to his team, his words drawing nods of agreement. "The truth is, we hadn't been seeing the whole picture, but now we're listening, and that's what matters." Thinking not just of Tasha, but of every voice subdued by silence, Avery encapsulated the sentiment with quiet resonance. This is about looking beyond the immediate, beyond what's in front of us. It's about asking harder questions even when they're uncomfortable. Every officer present knew this was not a pursuit ending at the precinct walls, but an expedition extending into communities, a dialogue entering lives softened by struggles many now realized they hadn't understood fully. Down below, within the walls of her holding room, Tasha Walker remained an anchor of presence. Her story, unwritten in full but unfolding perceptibly, existed in dialogue with the change she ushered into being, her silence having birthed a space for collective examination. Tasha's influence moved beyond the whispers contained in multicolored folders. Her story became a catalyst for ongoing dialogue marked by hope and investment in a future where justice and empathy might finally meet at par. As the day aged into afternoon, the precinct continued to echo with murmured realizations. Officers, now aware of their shared duty beyond simple delineations of guilt or innocence, embraced their new roles within the ever-expanding narrative of life, law, and morality. Together, they steered this ship away from predetermined routes into the open waters of discovery. They recognized that every life was a story intersecting with others, and that in each interaction, they had both the privilege and responsibility to listen. With sunbeams casting long shadows across the precinct walls, these officers stood unified in purpose and understanding, embarking upon a journey through complexities that lie at the heart of human experience, a tapestry of countless voices lifted toward a dawn promising a justice well heard. And as evening approached, the precinct, alive with intention, breathed in the air of possibility, letting go of the past to grab hold of a future yet unfurling. Their footsteps echoed upon new paths, drawn toward an ideal illuminated not merely by procedural obligations, but by the light of renewed commitment and shared direction. The precinct, once just a hub of routine, had become the fulcrum of a burgeoning narrative that stretched beyond its hardened facade. The public's response to Tasha Walker's case had sparked an introspection not just within the walls of justice, but across the city itself. An unseen pressure started to permeate, seeping into the daily procedures and subtly altering the dynamics within the precinct, as well as between the officers and the community they served. Detective Rain stood by the large windows overlooking the growing crowd, his silhouette framed by the soft filtering afternoon light. The sun hung like a languid guardian over the city, touching everything with a golden brush, as if blessing the transformative energy enveloping them all. He could feel the pulse of change as surely as he felt his own, They were intertwined now, bound by purpose and a shared acknowledgement of the layers of complexity they had only begun to Around him, the atmosphere thrummed with anticipation. Officers who'd once operated with merely procedural precision now moved with a newfound awareness, their tasks infused with an empathy that had begun to forge meaningful connections beyond mere duty. Mullins and Reynolds were deeply engaged in conversation, their dialogue reflecting the evolving ethos within the precinct. "We're more than just enforcers now," Mullins mused, his gaze sweeping over the evidence board. "There's a whole undercurrent of understanding we've been missing." Reynolds agreed, his voice a quiet counterpoint to Mullins' fervor. "It's like we've just scratched the surface. We need to dig deeper, beneath the apparent truths, to see the real narratives at play. It's not just about making arrests now, it's about meaningful resolutions." This burgeoning resolve resonated within Tasha Walker's story like a delicate thread woven seamlessly through a larger tapestry. Her narrative, once tangled in the complexities of identity and assumed roles, was beginning to unwind in an arena previously shrouded by constructed perceptions. Tasha, still within her captivity's confines, sensed the shift. Her influence, though quiet, expanded like concentric circles on a still pond, rippling outward, touching lives and instigating thoughts that dared question the status quo. She represented more than a case. She was a pivotal figure in a growing movement towards genuine understanding. Meanwhile, outside the precinct, the gathered crowd continued to swell, a living testament to the power of collective vigilance and purpose. Calls for reform resonated through the air, their echo merging with the resolve inside, creating a symphony of potential change. A crowd that started as a murmur had grown into a chorus demanding transformation, embodying a universal call for justice beyond its traditional confines. Onlookers, some curious, others steadfast in their advocacy, shared stories of commonality and commitment. Their conversations captured the zeitgeist of this pivotal moment in the city's life, a city on the precipice of significant change, ready to redefine its understanding of justice and equality. Back inside, the precinct's officers felt this external and internal pressure as two sides of the same coin, both demanding, urging them towards a more nuanced justice, one that listened as intently as it enforced. A shared determination to explore beyond their own shadows, to reach the conduits of real change, shaped their days now. Lieutenant Avery called a meeting, eager to consolidate the insights gained and formulate a strategy that would channel this newfound energy into tangible outcome. "We need to acknowledge what's unfolding here," he began, addressing the room with a calm authority. "This isn't just about policies, it's about people, how we engage with them, understand them, and support them." Rain nodded in agreement, adding, "We're not just linking events anymore, we're linking lives. Statistics need to give way to stories, enforcement to empathy." The meeting buzzed with a rare energy, something grounded in possibility rather than mere procedure. Officers who had witnessed countless cases found themselves invigorated by this shift. A shift prompted by Tasha's silent influence and the public's compelling plea outside their doors. As day gradually met dusk, bathing the city in hues of crimson and gold, the precinct's silhouette was not that of a lone institution, but part of a larger network of understanding, all interconnected, each supporting the other in a single, unified whole. Tasha Walker had held the mirror up to the city, reflecting back a vision of itself that was ready for transformation. Her story was a catalyst, a rallying point drawing together not just the officers, but an entire community, all invested in a shared future. Inside, every officer carried a part of this awakening, their hearts echoing the crowd's call for justice over mere punishment, awareness over assumption, each step a note in the symphony of renewed dedication. And as the precinct continued watching over the city, a living witness to the dawn of new clarity, Tasha sat, knowing that her silence had spoken volumes, prompted change, not through loud demands, but through the quiet, compelling truth of her existence. Within the precinct, a sense of determined resolve simmered, coalescing with the growing realization that their roles had expanded beyond the constraints of traditional policing. What had begun as a reactive investigation had organically grown into a proactive dialogue with the city they served, a transformation sparked by Tasha Walker's quiet defiance and the fervent energy resonating from the gathering crowd outside. The officers gathered in the conference room again, each one feeling the weight and sincerity of their shared purpose. They had come together, no longer simply as colleagues, but as participants in a broader narrative of change that called for compassionate engagement and actionable understanding. Detective Rain, standing at the forefront, felt the gravity of their situation, its complexity mirrored in the solemnity of his expression. Yet there was hope, too, a glimmer of possibility that underscored his words as he addressed the assembled team. "We're not just dealing with an investigation anymore," he said, his voice carrying the weight of recent insights. "We've become part of something larger, a movement towards rethinking how justice serves us all." Lieutenant Avery nodded, echoing Rain's sentiments with quiet authority. "This is a chance for us to redefine what justice means. Not just for Tasha, but for everyone. It's about accountability, yes, but also about empathy and respect." The room absorbed their leader's words, a collective understanding rippling through the group. Officer Mullins, moved by the events of recent days, clarified the simple yet profound truth that had emerged for him. "We're not just enforcing laws. We're forging community connections." "That's gotta mean something," Reynolds chimed in, propelled by an incipient sense of purpose. "And it'll take everyone, law enforcement and civilians alike, to sustain this momentum. We're all part of this story." Back in her holding room, Tasha Walker felt the subtle shifts in atmosphere, like a tactile sensation that enveloped her. Her story had become the connective tissue between disparate elements, and through the prism of her experiences, the precinct had slowly transformed into a space of possibility and inquiry. Tasha's life, with all its complexities and contradictions, was now less an anomaly and more a canvas of empowerment, illustrating the myriad ways individuals could engage with, challenge, and ultimately redefine the narratives imposed on them. Outside, the demonstrators continued their vigil, their peaceful assembly a testament to persistence and hope. They held signs not just in protest but in promise, as tangible expressions of solidarity and support for broader transformation. Through collective chants and silences, they wove a narrative parallel to the precinct's internal journey, a unified cry for empathy, fairness, and the humanization of justice. The meeting concluded with a consensus to lean into this collective sense of purpose and embrace their roles as partners in progress. They agreed to channel their internal lessons into actionable strategies that might serve as a framework for engagement with the broader community. This burgeoning dialogue between officers and civilians, initiated by Tasha's presence within their walls, represented more than just a fleeting inspiration. It marked a commitment to sustained engagement, to explore justice not as a finality, but as an evolving conversation between all involved. Lieutenant Avery and Detective Rain stood by the window, surveying the throng outside each face, each voice a reflection of the city's intricate tapestry. They realized this intersection of paths born from crisis had welded individuals into a collective, seeking resolutions that embraced understanding over divisions. Moments later, officers began to filter out of the precinct, ready to engage with the crowd. Their approach was not one of authority, but of invitation. They invited conversations that would transcend barriers, nurturing a shared vision of a future that promised inclusivity, woven with trust. For Tasha, the shift was profound. She watched as hearts and minds opened around her, igniting a shared determination for justice, one that bore her name but carried all their voices. It was an alignment of efforts, an insight born of her silent fortitude and the community's burgeoning momentum. The precinct echoed with newfound clarity, no longer just brick and glass, but alive with the rhythmic harmony of connection. Officers and civilians met beneath the open sky, nurtured by new understandings, where stories merged to inform, inspire, and pave the way for enduring change. A world where justice was just, beyond arrest, echoing through sustained embrace. And, as night settled over the city, Tasha Walker's influence lingered, a quiet but resilient thread interwoven into the night's tapestry. She had become more than her circumstances, transcending them to lead not from authority, but from presence, guiding them all toward a transformative horizon. Inside the precinct, subtle ripples of fatigue and resolve coursed through the halls, merging with the aspirations of every officer who had come to appreciate the full spectrum of their duty. There was newfound clarity, one born from quiet contemplation and shared epiphanies that Tasha Walker, inadvertently or not, had set in motion. The precinct no longer felt like a fortress as officers moved with the agility of those who had embraced change, knowing they were embarking on a journey toward genuine understanding. Their purpose extended beyond the immediate, evolving into a commitment that would outlast the current case. Detective Rain, as was now frequent, gathered his core team, Mullins, Reynolds, and Avery, engaging them in discussion more nuanced than procedural. It was an assembly convened not around facts, but rather the philosophical bearings of their roles. Together they had been unlocked to wider realities through the multidimensional portrait Tasha had unwittingly unveiled. "So, where are we headed next?" Mullins asked, his tone genuine, reflecting the curious dimensions of an officer who had begun to seek answers within more than without. "We continue to untangle Tasha's story," Rain replied, his voice firm. He had come to cherish authenticity over dogma, a shift spurred by recent revelations that had challenged assumptions they once took for granted. "There's still depth there we haven't fully understood." Her silence seems to have ignited something profound. Reynolds concurred, and we keep the dialogue going, not just internally but with the community. Use this momentum to foster genuine partnerships. Lieutenant Avery, ever the voice of tempered wisdom, leaned forward, his words deliberate. "If we're going to redefine how we serve, then let's focus on building trust from the ground up. Make it about connection, not just correction." The precinct had become more than a collective of investigators. It was a starting point for transformative change that engaged officers and civilians alike. The simple act of listening had ushered in an evolving ethos that now demanded to be carried forward. Outside, the city's streets hummed with early evening energy, a reflection of the internal shift taking place inside the precinct. The demonstrators, though fewer in number as the hour grew late, maintained their vigil, their resolve unwavering. Foreshadowed in their presence was the promise of continued engagement, a dialogue that hadn't just ended with Tasha's case, but had begun a campaign for enduring justice. For Tasha herself, still enfolded within the precinct's walls, the movement outside her room had become more than a backdrop to her own story. It represented a unified chorus of voices, extending beyond the physical into the realm of ideas. She sensed this collective's momentum, an unfolding narrative no longer bound by silence. Tasha's story had bridged gaps and forged harmonious connections between the once disparate entities of law enforcement and community. Her resilience, resonating from quiet contemplation, continually ignited the spark for this transformation, a reminder that identity and justice couldn't be confined to mere labels. As evening fell, casting long shadows across the cityscape, the precinct's task grew clearer. It was the beginning of an extended conversation, one encouraging partnerships that promised to resonate with authenticity and defy limitation. Detective Rain took one last look around, a small smile touching his lips as he confirmed they were all deeply committed now, not simply through duty but through choice, acknowledging the shared path they had embarked on, a journey sparked by the convergence of Tasha's silent influence and the cries for reform from the world outside. The precinct, once a singular element in the city's panorama, had embraced its role as an orchestra, tuning its notes to a rising hymn for justice, composed in harmony by the ensemble of diverse voices. And as they prepared to meet the future with open hearts and minds, Tasha Walker's influence persisted, a guiding star lighting the way, inscribing her impact into the very walls that had contained her. Her story, quietly powerful, now spread on the wings of awareness, a beacon not just to the precinct, but to a city poised to listen, learn, and grow. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the city awash in the soft glow of streetlights flickering to life. In their warm halo, shadows moved with purpose, accompanied by the muted hum of cars and the distant rumble of subway trains navigating their subterranean paths. It was a city alive, each beat of its heart echoing the pulse of the collective consciousness stirred by Tasha Walker's narrative. Back within the precinct, the air was filled with a sense of transition, as officers prepared to carry forward the lessons learned in the crucible of recent events. Though the space was designed for order and rigidity, it now held a fluid dynamism, a testament to the organic evolution unfolding within its walls. Detective Rain stood at the pivot of this evolution, feeling the energy shift around him as he considered the next steps in a saga that had expanded beyond initial expectation. His thoughts danced between the immediate and the enduring, contemplating both the intricacies of Tasha's circumstances and the broader implications for justice beyond the precinct doors. Every moment like this feels like both an ending and a beginning, Rain murmured to himself, fingers tracing the edges of a file yet unopened. His sentiments encapsulated the duality faced by the Precinct 1, eye on resolution, the other on inception. Lieutenant Avery joined him, sensing the weight of unspoken reflections. "We'll build from this," Avery said, his voice carrying the assurance of someone deeply invested in the future they were shaping, not just for themselves but for the community that relied on them. Outside, the remnants of the day's demonstration began to dissipate, participants folding their signs with care, yet leaving behind an indelible impression. They walked away not with resignation but with resolve, their presence having been more than symbolic. It was a pledge to continue the dialogue, to persist in the collective pursuit of justice that was comprehensive and inclusive. This was only the start of a long conversation, a prelude to the relationships that officers like Mullins and Reynolds were eager to cultivate. For the first time, their nightly patrols would carry the awareness that they were stewards of community trust, an understanding amplified by the silent power of Tasha's journey and the voices of all those who rallied for change. Inside the precinct, Tasha Walker awaited what came next, her patience not a passive state but an active engagement with her reality. She had become a central figure in a dialogue about identity, resilience, and the need for systems that understood the complexities of human experience. Her impact had transcended her circumstances, manifesting in the way officers now approached their roles, not as gatekeepers of justice, but as partners in an ongoing engagement with the communities they served. Her silence had been a powerful tool, invoking contemplation and urging a shift from mere routine to meaningful dialogue. As night embraced the city fully, Tasha allowed herself a moment of introspection. She reflected on the myriad roles she'd slipped into over her lifetime, each one informing the person she was today, a person whose simple endurance had challenged and quietly reshaped the world around her. The precinct, now serene in the waning light, held the promise of continued evolution. Each officer sensed the weight of necessity, understood their service as more than enforcement, as an opportunity to bridge divides and nurture understanding. Detective Rain, taking a final look at the precinct bathed in moonlight, recognized that the echoes of today would carry forward into tomorrow's actions. They had begun a journey defined by empathy and decisive introspection, one that embraced both reflection and resilience. And so, as night enveloped the precinct, it whispered promises of reformation. Guided by the breath of a city ready for change, Tasha Walker's narrative continued to unfold within it all, a resilient thread linking hope's beacon and justice's binding. In every shadow cast by those precinct walls lay the imprint of a shared journey, one drawn from a wellspring of collective insight and integrity. Each was a participant in unparalleled understanding of the dance between silence and sound, synchronicity and divergence, all heralding the dawn of justice. The transformation within the precinct was gradual, profound, and most importantly, sincere. Its officers had embarked on a journey of self-discovery and collective enlightenment, led by a narrative that demanded more than just passive observation. Tasha Walker, though still within the confines of her holding room, had become the nucleus from which this evolution spread, her silence reverberating loudly in the hearts and minds of all who crossed her path. Beneath the precinct's sturdy roof, where the essence of law and order had traditionally held sway, now existed a dynamic interplay of dialogue informed by an introspection as deep as the city itself. The officers, once rooted in routine, now found themselves participants in a broader discourse, a conversation not limited by the boundaries of their duties, but liberated by its possibilities. Detective Rain felt the shift most keenly. As he navigated the precinct's labyrinthine corridors, he observed changes so subtle, yet so significant in those around him. Their engagement, the light in their eyes, as conversations ventured beyond the strictly procedural into realms of empathy and shared humanity. Rain convened another meeting, determined to translate this newfound awareness into lasting impact. As he gathered with his team, Mullins, Reynolds, Avery, they shared more than strategies. They shared hopes, a collective vision coalescing from the fragments of Tasha's unfolding story. Everything we've learned here can be more than just a response to a single case, Rain began, his voice carrying the conviction of countless revelations. What Tasha's presence has taught us must inform how we proceed in every interaction, every decision. Mullins nodded in agreement, the lines of his face reflecting the gravity of his understanding. It's about building trust before you need it, he said. About seeing people as more than just what's in the file. We're in the position to redefine our roles, Reynolds chimed in. We've seen the power of standing still, of listening, of accepting that what's presented isn't all there is to know. We need to foster environments where people feel heard. Lieutenant Avery, whose steady leadership had been a guiding star throughout, leaned forward to join the conversation. Acting as caretakers of the truth means asking the right questions. Building bridges instead of barriers. Every step forward counts. Even as they spoke, the precinct pulsed in harmony with the world outside, the public who had begun to expect more from those tasked with their protection. The precinct's walls became less a divide and more a meeting place where officers and civilians alike congregated, each bringing their part in the narrative to light. Outside, night settled with a gentle embrace, its cloak of darkness soft and all-encompassing, like an invitation to renew one's spirit without fear. Within this cover, bonds continued to strengthen, old paradigms yielding to a fresh understanding, engendered by shared existence. Tasha Walker remained a guiding force, her silent defiance a beacon in its own right. Through her, the precinct had realized that it was possible to move beyond entrenched systems of authority into realms of mutual empowerment and compassion. The officers understood they were at the threshold of something profound, each one, like Rain, aware that this narrative would extend beyond Tasha's imminent departure, but called them toward continued dialogue rather than isolated decisions, urging them to transform introspection into impact. Inside the precinct, plans took root, plans to foster lasting relationships with the communities they served, to listen more deeply to the stories behind the statistics, to act not just as arbiters of the law, but as agents of change. And while the precinct, cast under its soft illumination, whispered its secrets only to those who chose to truly listen, a new dawn was approaching, one heralded by the commitment forged within those walls. As the precinct prepared for tomorrow's challenges, it did so knowing it had shifted from mere observation into active participation. This was a space no longer defined by what was within, but by its infinite potential born from embracing the unknown. As the city continued its nightly dance, the precinct stood as a testament to the enduring spirit of reform and renewal, a living promise that in stillness or revolution, every moment could be an opportunity to realize justice anew. For Tasha Walker, her narrative poised to continue beyond the precinct's embrace, had left a legacy of unyielding influence. Her story, shared through silence, enacted through change, became a thread within the fabric of determination woven not just for today, but for all the tomorrows it touched. The precinct, now echoing with quiet purpose, was ready to face the dawn's offering, a reckoning with itself, enriched by the journey of Tasha Walker, whose passage through their halls illuminated paths previously unseen, and whose resonance would guide them toward horizons yet unexplored. The precinct had become a crucible for transformation, each officer a participant in the collective awakening sparked by Tasha Walker's story. As they faced a new day, their resolve was refortified, shaped not only by duty, but by the deep understanding that true justice was a living, breathing entity, constantly evolving, not static or confined. Detective Rain found himself at the helm of this evolving narrative, his leadership invigorated by newfound insight. He recognized that Tasha's journey through their precinct had woven a tapestry that was as much about internal reflection as it was about outward action. The story was not hers alone. It had become theirs. An unending dialogue inviting reflection, critique, and reconstruction. This morning, the precinct bustled with activity charged with refreshing energy. Officers exchanged nods of recognition, and unspoken camaraderie threaded through their shared experiences. Each action, each conversation bore the weight of their recent realizations, aimed towards building and maintaining bridges that transcended authority, leading instead to community. As Ryan convened a meeting, the room filled with the determination born of unified vision. Mullins, Reynolds, and Avery were present, each bringing their unique perspectives and affirmations of commitment to carry forward the lessons learned. "We've moved beyond an individual case," Rain began, eyes sweeping over faces that were no longer just colleagues but compatriots. "What we've learned from Tasha guides us to a new understanding of justice, one that we shape through our interactions, decisions, and the trust we cultivate." Mullins leaned in, his voice soft but resolute. "It's not just about what we do within these walls. Our task is to extend this understanding to every corner of our city, making sure every voice is heard and every story acknowledged." Reynolds added, "We need to be the example, a precinct that honors the complexities of human experiences and responds with empathy and action." Lieutenant Avery, with the wisdom earned over many years, encapsulated their commitment. "Our roles redefine themselves as facilitators of dialogue and understanding. This is more than a resolution, it's a continuous promise to strive for a deeper justice." Meanwhile, the city, now emboldened by the precinct's resolve, buzzed with anticipation, a reflection of the shifts within these walls. The public, servants or served, were now entwined in a renewed partnership, recognizing shared humanity as the foundation of their interactions. Tasha Walker's presence, once a singular narrative of quiet resistance, had become the catalyst for profound systemic introspection. Her story had shown them that silence spoke with a profound clarity, capable of breaking through noise and assumptions to reveal truths previously obscured. Her journey was more than a personal ordeal. It was an odyssey of transformation that extended beyond the individual and into the collective consciousness of a precinct, a city, and perhaps even further. As the team prepared to translate their commitment into action, they embraced a newfound path, one less traveled, illuminated not by authority but by empathy, respect, and an unyielding dedication to understanding. Tasha Walker's legacy, crafted within the precinct's confines, now radiated outward. It was an enduring influence inscribed not in policy alone, but in the ethos of each officer willing to carry forward her lesson in their heart, reflected in every engagement, fostering understanding over enforcement. As the precinct team dispersed to begin another day, Detective Rain paused to absorb the moment's enormity. He realized that they stood at the precipice of not just a narrative arc, but a continuously unfolding chapter, a story written not in reports but in lives touched by the power of shared vision and understanding. The precinct, the city, and its people now charted a new course, guided by the intimate truth that justice is not a distant ideal, but a collective commitment, where every silence bears the potential for 1,000 voices ready to speak and be heard. And so the precinct journeyed onward, its legacy etched in the everyday acts of courage and compassion that redefined justice with each rising dawn. And as the sun poured its light upon their path, the promise began to shimmer in their resolve, a beacon of collective honesty, justice, and growth, ready for the dawn awaiting them all. As the precinct moved forward into the new day, there was an air of anticipation, woven with clarity and determination. Tasha Walker's impact lingered like a soft echo, guiding their steps as they ventured into an era of deeper understanding and redefined justice. Each officer was now an active participant in a tapestry of change, eager to carry forward the flame ignited by Tasha's journey. Detective Rain, imbued with the lessons learned, set his resolve to translate internal insights into lasting transformation. The precinct, once a place of static authority, had transformed into a crucible of evolving values. It had become a space where justice was not merely dispensed, but discovered through empathy and dialogue. The energy within the precinct was like dawn breaking, a resurgence of new possibilities as officers prepared to forge connections with the community that went beyond simple interaction. There was recognition that every moment offered opportunities for engagement and growth, essential threads in the fabric of a diverse urban landscape. Rain, alongside Mullins, Reynolds, Avery, and their colleagues, stood poised at the forefront of this new beginning. Their mandate was clear: to embody the principles of nuanced justice, to be avatars of change in every corner of their daily routine, and to build bridges of trust with each person they encountered. "It's not just about us being here for the community," Mullins reflected, his words resonating with those gathered. "It's about being with the community, building partnerships that are rooted in understanding and mutual respect." Reynolds nodded, thoughts aligning with a broader vision they had all embraced. "We need to ensure that our actions reflect our promise. We can't remain passive observers. We must be ally and advocate." Lieutenant Avery, whose steady hand had been instrumental in navigating these transformative waters, summed up the essence of their mission. "If anything, Tasha's story has taught us that every voice matters. True justice requires us to commit to listening, to asking the hard questions, and to seeking truth even when it's uncomfortable." Outside, the city thrummed with life, its people moving to their own rhythms, unknowingly buoyed by the precinct's renewed commitment. Tasha Walker's influence radiated through every interaction, an invisible tether connecting the precinct's ethos with the world beyond its door. The city had started to change as well, its citizens empowered by the understanding that they were integral threads in the communal fabric. They recognized that justice was not an imposition, but a dialogue, a reflection of collective will to build a society grounded in fairness, empathy, and inclusivity. And for Tasha, her release was imminent. She would walk from the precinct not just as a free woman, but as a symbol of enduring resilience. Her story, once confined, was now a beacon fueling the precinct's legacy, a testament to the power of one voice catalyzing the enormous capacity for change. As she emerged into the sunlight, the officers held their breaths, watching her silhouette merge with the city, her path paving the way for others to follow, others who might challenge assumptions and demand justice crafted through understanding. For Detective Rain and his team, the journey continued. They were part of something larger, a movement not just to enforce law, but to transform it. Their days now looked different, the mundane marked by a renewed sense of purpose, a recognition that every action, every connection mattered. The precinct had become more than a site of authority. It was a living pledge to honor stories, to acknowledge the complexities of the human condition, and to advocate for a justice system intertwined with empathy and understanding. As the precinct settled into its rhythm, the echoes of Tasha Walker's silence had become a guiding symphony, a harmonious blend of voices urging them toward a brighter, more just future. And with every step they took, Rain and his colleagues moved not alone, but as custodians of a justice illuminated by truth, guided by collective resolve. The city, alive with the transformative energy resonating from those interactions, breathed in harmony with this renewed spirit. And as the precinct's heartbeat aligned with the rhythm of its people, it advertised its promise. A new dawn had arrived, carved from the whispers of justice, born into the light of a shared horizon.